Have you ever noticed how the more you try to make something perfect, the worse it looks? That's because perfection isn't creativity, it's fear disguised as discipline. So, by the end of this video, you'll understand why bad art connects deeper than perfect art ever could, and how freeing yourself from perfection might be the thing that saves your creativity. Miss this, and you might spend your whole life waiting to be ready without ever actually starting. Have you ever noticed how easy it is to talk yourself out of creating something? You'll sit down with an idea that feels alive, something that once lit up your chest, and before you even open your sketch, pick up the camera, or hit record, your brain starts to say, "What if it sucks?" That voice is subtle, but it's powerful. It doesn't yell, it just quietly convinces you to wait until you're better, wait until you've learned more, wait until it's perfect. And so you don't start. You call it planning, but really it's fear wearing a responsible face. So the truth is that every creative person you've ever admired has heard that same voice. Every artist, filmmaker, writer, designer, every one of them has felt that quiet dread that maybe this time they won't live up to their own idea. Maybe their taste is higher than their ability. Maybe they're not actually good enough. And that's the tragedy of being a creative in this era. We live with the infinite inspirations but zero emotional safety to fail. We grew up watching people blow up online overnight, watching artists go from unknown to genius with a single post, and somewhere deep down, we absorbed this lie that if our work doesn't instantly look like it's good, it's not worth sharing. But that's not creativity, that's marketing. The fear of making something bad isn't about your art, it's about your identity. It's about wanting to be seen as good, as worthy, as someone who has it. You start making art not to express yourself, but to protect your image, and that's when art dies. Because the second you start creating to protect your ego instead of just releasing your truth, you're not creating anymore, you're just performing. Most of us learned this fear early on. Maybe someone told you your drawing wasn't realistic enough, or maybe you posted a video once that got silence instead of likes, and maybe your parents asked, that question that kills every artist's soul: can you really make a living off of that? So, whatever it is, it planted this quiet panic inside of you that maybe what you love isn't enough, and that maybe you aren't enough. And so now, every time you create, you feel like you're walking this tightrope between wanting to be seen and wanting to disappear. You want people to notice, but not too much. You want to be recognized, but only for your best versions. You want to express something raw, but you don't want to be vulnerable. This tension, that's what keeps you stuck, and you tell yourself, look, I'm not ready yet, but you'll start once you have the right camera, or the right followers, or the right style, but none of those are the real issues. What's actually happening is that you're terrified of being seen trying, because trying means you could fail, and failure in the age of visibility feels like public humiliation. And it's not even the fact of, making something bad that hurts, it's imagining everyone watching you do it. And that's the curse of creating in a world where everything is posted, shared, judged, dissected. There's no room for process anymore, no room for being a beginner. You used to be able to learn in private. Now everything just feels like this performance, and even your mistakes and that pressure kills creativity. Because creativity isn't born from certainty, it's born from play, from messing around, from exploring without knowing the outcome of things. You can't think your way into good art. You have to feel your way into there. That every experiment has to be worth someone's attention. That every move we make has to prove that we're good enough to be here. And it's exhausting. It's no wonder that so many creatives are burnt out before they even get to begin. They're not tired of art, but they're tired of the pressure to be perfect at it. But here's what no one's going to tell you is the more you chase perfection, the further you get from creativity. Because perfection isn't creativity, it's control. And control kills spontaneously. It kills play, it kills emotion. And when you overthink every choice, you stop listening to your own instincts. You start making decisions based on fear instead of just feeling. And when that happens, your work loses its heartbeat. I mean, you can tell when someone's art is made from fear. It's clean, it's polished, it's symmetrical and empty. It feels like it was built in a lab, not felt in the soul. So when someone creates from freedom, from the willingness to make something bad, you feel it immediately. It's alive, it's flawed, it's human, and that's what the fear of making something bad steals from you. It's not your potential, but your humanity, because what people actually connect to isn't perfection, it's presence. It's seeing a piece of themselves in what you made, and people can't connect to you if you're too busy trying to be flawless. It's easy to forget that all art started out as someone's failure. Every great painter once made ugly sketches. Every musician once wrote bad songs. Every filmmaker once made scenes that just did not work out. That's the way it works. You make something bad, then you make something slightly less bad, and then one day you wake up and it's good. But that takes humility. It takes letting go of this idea that your worth depends on your output. And that's the hardest part because perfection feels safe. It gives you a sense of control in a world that's uncontrollable. It convinces you that if you can just fix it this one line, this one color, this one frame, then maybe you'll finally feel okay. But you won't, because what you're really trying to fix is in your art. It's your fear. And fear doesn't get smaller by avoiding it, it gets smaller by facing it. Every time you make something bad, you're teaching your brain that failure won't kill you. You're proving to yourself that rejection is survival, that you can handle being misunderstood. And that's when art starts becoming fun again, because you're no longer trying to earn the permission to create, you're just creating. So when you finally give yourself that permission to make something bad, you're going to remove that weight. You remove the tension. You start to remember why you love this in the first place, because art isn't supposed to feel like this test. It's supposed to feel like a relief. So when you feel that fear, when your mind starts spiraling into what if it sucks, that's your cue just to do it, because that's the moment you're closest to something real. Fear is proof that you care. It means that something's at stake. It means that you're not just making for the sake of making, you're trying to translate something personal into the world. And that's what makes you an artist. Not the quality of your work, not how polished it is, but the fact that you're willing to feel sacred, scared, and make it anyway. Because that's the truth most people miss. The fear of making something bad is the birthplace of everything good. Without it, you would never evolve. You would never surprise yourself. You'll never make something that scares you in the best way. So if you're scared right now, good. That means you're exactly where you should be. It means you still care. It means you still have something in your worth sharing. You just have to stop asking if it's good to be good enough and start asking if it's going to be honest, because honesty will always outlive perfect. And once you realize that, you're going to stop fearing bad art altogether, because you understand that there's no such thing as bad art when it comes from a real place. There's only growth, truth, in the next attempt. So if you're waiting for a sign to start, this is it. Make the thing, mess it up, let it be ugly, awkward, imperfect. Because the sooner you start making bad art, the sooner you'll make more honest art. And that's what people will remember. Not how clean it looked, not how perfect it was, but how human it felt. And that's what makes it timeless. There's a strange thing that happens when you chase perfection just for too long. At first, it feels noble, right? It's disciplined even. You tell yourself you're refining, improving, maturing, but one day you look up and you realize you haven't finished anything in months. You're surrounded by drafts, half-edited clips, unfinished canvases, folders labeled almost. That's the quiet graveyard of perfectionism. A place where potential goes to die. So you start thinking, I'm not a perfectionist, I just have high standards, right? I was like this, but high standards aren't the problem. The problem is the illusion that perfection will one day make you feel safe, that it'll protect you from embarrassment, rejection, regret. It never does. Because perfection doesn't make you fearless, it just makes you more cautious. It convinces you to edit life until it's sanitized, until every emotion, every mistake, every ounce of humanity is polished out of existence. Perfection promises freedom, but delivers paralysis. And I think the worst part is that you don't even notice this happening. You start small, you fix one little thing, then another. You tell yourself it's almost done, just one last tweak, right? One last detail. But what you're really doing is trying to hide your insecurity under craftsmanship. You're not perfecting the art, you're perfecting the mask. Because deep down, perfectionism isn't about standards, it's about shame. It's the fear of being seen as average, the fear of being ordinary, the fear that maybe after all this time and effort, you still won't stand out. And in a world obsessed with visibility, the fear makes sense. We live in an era where everything is posted, reviewed, rated, compared, where the worth of a painting isn't measured by how it feels, but by how well it photographs, where music isn't valued by what it says, but how well it performs on the algorithm. So when you live in that environment, perfection feels like this armor to us. It gives you this illusion that you can outwork humiliation, that you can avoid failure if you're polished enough. But the irony is, the more you perfect your work, the less it feels alive. Because perfection removes friction, and friction is what makes art human. So think about your favorite song. It probably isn't flawless because the singer voice cracks in one part. Maybe it's a little bit raspy, or maybe there's a background noise. Maybe the timing's a little bit off. But that's what makes it real. That's what makes it feel like someone's soul is inside of it. Now think about a piece of art that feels sterile, right? Overly produced, calculated, precise. It's technically impressive, but you don't really feel anything. That's what happens when art becomes a performance instead of just a reflection of emotions. That's what perfection does. It kills emotion in the name of appearance. When you try too hard to control how you work is perceived, you start to erase the very thing people connect to: honesty. So art isn't supposed to look perfect, it's supposed to feel inevitable, like it had to exist, no matter how messy or strange or unconventional it is. But now we live in this age where everyone is taught to self create like a brand, where your worth as a creator feels tied to a presentation, your aesthetic, your feed, your output. And slowly, art stops being an act of discovery and becomes an act of maintenance. You're not exploring anymore, you're protecting this reputation, and that's when you stop growing. Because perfectionism doesn't just kill creativity, it kills curiosity. It turns every creative act into performance, not for the world, but for your own expectations. You stop asking, oh, what if, and start asking, what will they think? You stop playing and you start rehearsing. And the moment you start rehearsing, you lose the magic. Because art isn't a result of control. It's the product of surrender. It's what happens when you let go of knowing and allow instinct to lead. That's how masterpieces are born. Not through calculations, but through chaos. So when an artist loses themselves in the process, when they stop caring how it looks and just let the moment move through them, that's when something divine happens. That's when art transcends taste. It becomes a truth. But perfection never lets you get out there. Because perfection is all about control, and control is the opposite of trust. You can't trust your instincts if you're constantly editing them. You can't discover your voice if you're constantly trying to make a sound like someone else's. And that's what perfectionists are really doing. It's comparing. You every time you overpolish, you're trying to compete with a ghost. You're measuring your work against someone's highlight reel that's not even their process. So you see the final product, but not the thousands of failures behind it. You forget that the thing you're trying to match probably went through just as much chaos as the thing you're hiding. You think you're chasing excellence, but really you're chasing approval. And the tragedy of perfection is that it keeps moving the finish line. You reach one level and suddenly it's not enough. You improve and the bar rises. You finally make something good, and instead of pride, you feel relief. Not joy, not fulfillment, just relief that it wasn't embarrassing. So that's not creativity, that's survival. And survival kills art faster than anything else. Because when you create from fear, your work becomes a mirror of that fear. It's tight, overworked, cautious, it's beautiful but dead. Meanwhile, someone out there is probably making something messy, raw, and imperfect, and it connects instantly, not because it's better, but because it's alive. I think that's the paradox. the more you try to make something flawless, the less it matters. Because people don't remember perfect, they remember real. You can scroll through 1,000 perfect things in a day and just feel nothing. But one shaky, heartless video shot on a phone can stop you in your tracks. One song recorded in a bedroom can hit harder than $1 million studio mix. It's because the soul behind it wasn't filtered out in the pursuit of polish. We like to pretend that perfection earns respect, but what people actually respect is vulnerability, the willingness to show imperfection, the courage to say, this is where I'm at right now, and this is the best I can do today. And that honesty, that's what resonates. And ironically, when you stop trying to be perfect, you actually start getting better, faster. Because perfectionism is slow, it's static, it keeps you stuck in one place, tweaking the same idea forever. And imperfection moves, it breathes, it evolves. So when you accept that your work will never be perfect, you finally give yourself permission to keep going. And consistency will do more for your growth than perfection ever will. You'll make 10 bad things and stumble into one beautiful accident, something that surprises even you. That surprise, the moment where instincts overtakes intellect, that's where art lives. That's the difference between artists who last and those who are burnt out. The ones who last understand that art is a relationship. It's not a performance. They don't demand perfection from it. They show up for it, flaws and all, because they know that imperfection isn't the enemy, it's the evidence that they're alive. So when you look at something handmade, something imperfect, you can feel the human in it. You can see where they hesitate. You can sense their emotion in the texture, the brushstroke, the note that almost breaks. And that's what makes it beautiful. It's not because it's flawless, but because it's full of life. Every time you overcorrect, you erase a piece of yourself. Every time you play it safe, you trade honesty for approval. Every time you hide behind perfect, you kill the one thing art is supposed to protect, your voice. So maybe the death of perfection isn't a tragedy after all. Maybe it's the beginning of something better. Maybe it's the rebirth of honesty, because when you stop worshiping perfection, you start seeing beauty everywhere again, in the cracks, in the attempts, in the half-finished works that still carry that energy. You start realizing that done is better than ideal, that truthful is better than beautiful, that the goal isn't to impress, but it's to connect. So when you start creating from that place, you start to feel again. You stop chasing a version of yourself that doesn't exist. You start to trust the one thing that's been here all along. Because maybe art isn't supposed to be perfect. Maybe it's supposed to remind us that we aren't either, and that's okay, because that's where the humanity is. Perfection is sterile, but imperfection is alive. At some point, every creative reaches a quiet breaking point. You've spent months chasing perfection, polishing, comparing, deleting. You've made drafts no one ever seen, projects that live and die inside hard drives. And then one day, you wake up and you realize you're not creating anymore. You're just maintaining this image of someone who used to be. That's the cost of perfection. It slowly convinces you to stop trying, and then something strange happens, right? You hit a wall so hard that the only way forward is through surrender. You get tired, and not of art, but of yourself. Tired of thinking so much, tired of waiting for the right time, tired of needing everything to mean something. And in that moment of exhaustion, you whisper to yourself, just screw it at this point. When you finally make something bad on purpose, something you don't plan, something messy and quick and impulsive, the kind of thing you'd be embarrassed to post, when you do this, you feel something you haven't felt in years. Freedom. That's what crappy art really is. It's freedom disguised as failure. When you stop trying to make something good, you start making something honest. Because suddenly you're not thinking about how it looks, you're thinking about how it feels, and that small shift from perfection to presence can save your entire creative life. So the truth is that making crappy art resets your nervous system in a way. It takes you back to the beginning, before followers, before the algorithms, before identity got tangled up in validation, back to that kid version of you who drew on the notebook paper, recorded songs on their laptops or their phones, painted with whatever you had, right? It was not to prove anything, but because it felt good to make something exist. That's what art is supposed to be. It's a dialogue between your curiosity and the world. It's not a test, it's not a resume, just a moment of being alive. We talk about finding our style like it's a destination, but style is what happens when you make enough bad work that the truth starts leaking through it. You don't design it, you earn it. By creating without control until your instincts start to show you who you are. That's the irony of crappy art, because it doesn't actually make you worse, it makes you more real. Being real will always outperform the perfect. So when you let yourself make bad art, crappy art, you learn to detach from the outcome, and detachment is where peace lives. Because once you realize that you're not owed praise, you stop needing it. You stop obsessing over how you're perceived and start paying attention to how you're changing. Every creative has to go through this quiet ego death, the death of wanting to look impressive, the death of chasing aesthetics instead of emotions. Because when you finally let the version of yourself die, the real artist gets born. The one who creates without needing to win. And that's what crappy art gives you. It gives you the permission to exist without justification, to fail loudly, to look foolish, to be a beginner again. It's humbling, yes, but humility is how you reconnect with sincerity, because somewhere along the way, we confused mastery with meaning. We started thinking the value of art was in how well it's done, but that's not true. It's not how deeply it's felt. But the pieces that stay with people aren't the ones that win awards. They're the ones that make them feel less alone. Here's what most people don't realize. Making crappy art doesn't just heal your curiosity, it heals your relationship with yourself. When you allow yourself to make something bad, you're sending your inner child a message. You're safe now. You don't have to perform to be loved. You don't have to get it right every time. That's powerful. Because most of us stopped creating when we learned that love felt conditional. When someone laughed at what we made or compared us to someone better. Ever since then, we've been chasing this version of art that guarantees acceptance. But that version doesn't even exist. Making bad art breaks that illusion. It forces you to confront rejections and realize it doesn't define you. You post something that flops, you know what? You'll still survive. You show someone your rough draft and the world doesn't end. And slowly that fear that's been strangling your creativity, it starts to loosen. You stop trying to be bulletproof and start being honest, and honesty in a world full of performance is revolutionary. The best artists aren't fearless, they're unashamed. They're not the ones who never make bad work, they're the ones that never hide, because they understand that failure is the tax you pay for originality. Every piece of crappy art you make is a breadcrumb leading you closer to truth. Every cringy video brings you one step closer to finding your voice. So it's not wasted effort, okay? It's evidence of effort, proof that you showed up. And that's what the creative process really asks of you. Not perfection, but presence, to keep showing up again and again until your fear runs out of things to say. So when you create freely, you reconnect the joy. That quiet, childlike joy that's not about success or validation, but about discovery. You start seeing beauty in the small things again. You start realizing that art isn't something you do, it's something you notice. So when you live in that awareness, everything becomes art. The way you talk, the way you dress, the way you see the world, life itself becomes a medium. And that's when you understand that making crappy art was never about the art. It was about freeing the artist. So here's the secret that most people miss, is that perfection creates distance, but imperfection creates intimacy. When your art is messy, people see themselves in that. They feel the permission to be messy too. You stop being a performer and just start being a mirror. That's why making crappy art doesn't just save you, it saves everyone. Because when they witness your imperfection with an apology, it teaches them to forgive their own. It's contagious. It's one honest piece of art can undo years of self-doubt in someone else. So maybe the world doesn't need more polished, pristine, over-designed creations. Maybe it needs more artists who are willing to bleed a little, to make something alive and not just something light. So in the end, all great art is just bad art that kept going. It's the accumulation of 1,000 imperfect attempts that eventually stumbles into something sacred. And the only reason that moment happens, that stroke of brilliance, that one idea that changed everything, is because you didn't quit when it was ugly. And that's why crappy art matters. Because it keeps you in motion, it keeps you humble, it keeps you real, and it's not about longer standards, but it's about raising your tolerance for being human, for trying, failing, and trying again without shame. So here's the truth I wish someone told every artist before they started. You don't become great by avoiding bad work. You become great by surviving it, by letting it teach you, by loving the process more than the praise. Because art was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to remind us that we are not. So make the sketch that looks wrong. Record the song, even if it's off key. Post the photo that isn't framed right. Write the sentence that doesn't sound deep enough. So just do it. Just do it all anyway. Because one day you'll look back and realize that none of it was crappy after all. It was just the beginning of honesty. It was the first sound of your voice learning how to speak, and maybe that's the only thing art was ever trying to teach us, that the point isn't to be flawless, it's to be felt. So go ahead, make the crappy art, let it be raw, clumsy, unfiltered, because somewhere inside that imperfection is a version of you that still believes in magic, and that version, that's the one worth keeping alive.